Alrighty, welcome back to Acts chapter 15 and verse number 36. Paul and Barnabas have been settled in Antioch, ministering to the church there for some time, but then they decide, it's been a while since we took that first missionary journey, and so let's return to some of those places and see how everything's going. These days, communication's so easy, but back in those days, it wasn't so easy, and they didn't have near the benefits that we have to be able to disseminate information quickly. So let's start reading in Acts 15 and verse number 36. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, quote, "Let us return, visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaimed the word of the Lord and see how they are," end quote. Verse number 37, Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also. But Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Now, you might recall that story in Acts chapter 13 on the first missionary journey. Paul and Barnabas with John Mark, and they started off sailing to Cyprus and ministered across the island of Cyprus. And at some point in time, then John Mark deserted them and went back to Antioch. We're never told the reason, but he didn't continue on the journey. And so now Barnabas says, hey, let's give John Mark another chance here, and Paul doesn't want to give another chance. So there must have been more to it, I think, than just John Mark deserted them. That wouldn't seem to be such a great infraction. Why did he desert them? Obviously, he didn't want to be with them. And so that probably means that his deserting them at the first time was precipitated by complaints. No one likes to have a complainer along. In fact, the ministry of Heaven's Family, which I direct, we have, more so in the past days than these days, taken team mission trips with us. And I learned to put in the original documentation when we were interviewing people that wanted to go with us on our mission trips, I said, just so you know, once they've been accepted, this is a no complaint mission trip. Because we got enough challenges traveling around the world and all the logistics and all the unexpected things that come up. We don't need complainers. We need people that always keep a positive attitude. Okay? And so again, I'm just guessing here, but I suspect that John Mark left because, he just reached the end of his rope and just couldn't take it anymore and headed back. So that's what the disagreement's about. Now, here's the solution. There occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. Now, there's a lot of things that people read into that. And they often read into it some sense of carnality and saying, isn't this a great tragedy that these guys couldn't get along? Two good brothers who had traveled together on missionary journey before and been so fruitful, the devil got in there and broke them up. I don't think it was quite that way. I think these guys were a little bit more mature than that. They couldn't find agreement regarding John Mark. And John Mark's offenses when he deserted them during the first missionary journey must have been pretty serious or dramatic, or Paul would not have been so unyielding in this situation. But he didn't want to repeat it, and we don't know. He might have thought it was best that for John Mark's sake that he not go. Maybe John Mark got sick on that first journey or something, and just couldn't take the hardship of it, and had to go back for that reason. And maybe Paul is saying, look, for John Mark's sake, he's not built for this. I don't think he's begging us to go. I don't think we ought to take him. I think we just ought to just, tell him, look, God hasn't called everyone to do this, and we don't think he's called you. So you don't know those details, so don't make those kinds of assumptions and make Paul and Barnabas look so carnal. And you say, well, what about it says they had a sharp disagreement? Well, again, the Greek words there, the sharp and the disagreement, they can be variously translated. It doesn't have to, mean exactly how we would interpret sharp disagreement and fighting and yelling. That's not what it meant at all. It just means it was provocative to the sense that they just couldn't reach an agreement about it. And then when you look at the solution is beautiful. If you look at a map in the back of your Bible, Paul's first missionary journey, you'll see the first thing they did is they left Antioch, they hopped on a boat, and they went to Cyprus. And it was sometime near the end of that time in Cyprus when John Mark deserted them. And then as they made this loop, they came back in through Galatia, Lystra, and the other Antioch, and so forth, and Derbe, and then made their way back to the Antioch where the church was. And so it's kind of a loop. And from your standpoint, it'd be like this way. Now, if you look at the second missionary journey, you'll see that Paul basically decided to go with Silas and backtrack on where he had left off on the first missionary. So where he ended the first missionary journey, that's where he starts the second missionary journey. And Barnabas and his companion John Mark retrace the steps of the first missionary journey by, first of all, going to Cyprus, the very place where John Mark abandoned them the first time. And so they've got this loop, so they're taking different ends of the loop, doubling up their efforts. How smart is that? That's great. And I tend to think that it was a painful splitting up, these two good friends, but then they realized, hey, we can't agree on John Mark, so how about this? How about we'll double our efforts here, and I'll go the reversed loop, and you go the same way we went before, and you take John Mark, and hopefully he'll make it past Cyprus and on into the next segment of your journey. And meanwhile, I'll already be at those places where we wouldn't have gotten for months and months because we're splitting up here. Is that okay with you? That's okay with me. All right, did you get it? Okay, so really, all things work together for good, and sometimes we face these difficulties that force us to make decisions that really wind up being the best thing, had we thought about it from the beginning, but the circumstances forced us into doing something that we didn't see the wisdom of it from the outset. Okay, that's what I believe. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, thanks so much for joining me. Next time we continue with Paul and Silas on their exciting journey. Can't wait for that. See you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.